Morning, all. All right, so how about a 32 team, 32 player video to start off the day? I agree. I think that's a good idea. So what I've done is I've got teams in a random order of sorts. The first 16 teams I will talk about players from all missed the playoffs. The next 8 are the teams that lost in the first round, then the 4 that lost in the second round, the 2 that lost in the conference finals, and of course the Stanley Cup finalists will be the last ones that I go over here. So what I've got here is a list of players that I enjoyed watching play this year, one for each team. This isn't about MVPs. This isn't about unsung heroes. This is about guys I want to talk about, one from each team. And so there'll likely be other videos of this nature over the next couple of weeks as well, because it's fun to look back on the season and talk about players who played well, or at some point soon, I'll be doing one as well on players that I think will have a bounce back year next year, or that maybe achieved too much, and maybe we're going to see their point totals come down. Maybe it's a goaltender who just had this awesome season and it's going to come down a bit. So there's goalies on this list as well. So we're going to start off with Arizona. In Arizona, there were a couple that I could have talked about, but I want to talk about Shane Goss because Arizona had a rough year, as expected. Nobody expected them to be anywhere near the playoffs. Goss was pretty much from game 1 through game 82 a consistent player for the Arizona Coyotes. The points were there. He had a big bounce back after being acquired by the Coyotes. I had expected him to be traded at the deadline. He's still there, and there's no reason not to keep him through next season as well. Goss, nice bounce back year and quite the redemption story, and all of a sudden his contract looks pretty darn good. So that's the funny thing. When a player produces, his contract looks a lot better. Matt Duchene in Nashville is a good example of that. All of a sudden his contract's not that bad if he produces like that, right? All right, Seattle, I went with Donato. Now, I have a soft spot for Donato because I like Ted Donato, who was a Bruin, and of course Ryan related, and started with the Bruins as well, and I knew there was a 20-goal scorer there. Now, he had 16 for Seattle. I still think there's a 20-goal season there. So if Seattle gets a bit better offensively, and if he doesn't have his ice time cut as a result, so if Seattle gets better, Donato probably ends up getting his ice time cut. But if he doesn't next year, I think a 20-goal season is absolutely within his reach. So it's been nice to see him play well in Seattle. There were some good stories with the Kraken this year. Jared McCann being a good story there as well. But Donato, quite the story. San Jose was tough. San Jose was tough because there were a couple I could have talked about that are obvious. Meyer, Hurdle, Couture, Burns, Carlson, the normal. And I've talked about Barabanov a lot. So I thought, well, do I want to talk about Ferraro? You know what? No. I want to talk about Bordeleau. When Bordeleau was drafted, scouts were torn on whether or not he was going to be an NHL player. He only played, I think it was 8 games this year, but he looked good. And I think that for Bordeleau, I'll be interested to see how he does over a full season in the National Hockey League. And with him, with Eklund, and other prospects getting into the mix here, San Jose is going to need that. As other guys get older, they're going to need these young kids to come in and play well, right? You need that depth in your organization. So Bordeleau, I thought, played well. I was actually impressed. I think he exceeded my expectations. Again, it's a small sample size. We'll see how it goes next season. Buffalo. I got lazy with Buffalo. I admit I got lazy with Buffalo. It's Alex Tuck. Alex Tuck, since joining the Sabres, he absolutely turned everything around offensively for them. Suddenly they had a really good first line. He was on it and immediately seemed to be better than he was in Vegas. And Vegas, all I know is that when the team I was cheering for was against the Vegas Golden Knights and Tuck was in the lineup, I feared that stretch pass to Tuck. If it was a 1-goal lead, I was like, they're going to get that stretch pass to Tuck and he's going to score, and it's going to ruin my next 10 minutes. It's just going to ruin the next 10 minutes of my life, and then I'll move on. But yeah, Tuck has been fantastic, and honestly, that Eichel deal already looks like it was a pretty good trade for the Sabres. It really revitalized the team. We'll see how it works out next year, but as long as Tuck can stay healthy, a lot of fun to watch. Chicago. For Chicago, I went with Dylan Strome. So there were a few I could have gone with in Chicago, but Dylan Strome was a healthy scratch. He was on the market. Remember, they didn't have a place for him down the middle. And then things change. You get a new coach, you get new setups, and all of a sudden Strome looks really good. There's rumors about whether or not DeBrincat might be on the move. I might be tempted if I was a team dealing with Chicago to say, you know what, I want DeBrincat and I want Strome. I might be tempted to see if I could get them, put them together, and see what happens. But again, we'll get into probably some DeBrincat talk at some point soon because there's a lot of it out there. I'm kind of in the same position with DeBrincat for the Hawks as I am with Miller for the Canucks, except with DeBrincat, he's a lot younger. Again, we'll get into that. But yeah, Dylan Strome had a really good season after what was a bumpy start, and I never heard him complain. And I'm always impressed by players who are either healthy scratches or bumped down the lineup. They don't complain about it. It's refreshing. Montreal. Rem Pitlick, he bounces around it. It has to be the defensive side of the game that causes him to get waived. But I like Rem Pitlick, and I think he played well in Montreal. I'd really like to see him get a full season with Montreal next year, and I think he played well enough to earn that. Now, whether or not new management in Montreal means a change of who's going to be on the ice, and I think Marty St. Louis can have a lot of say in who stays and who goes. But I hope Pitlick sticks around. I thought Rem Pitlick was good, and if keeping Tyler Pitlick around keeps him happy, then you keep Tyler Pitlick around as well. I'm less convinced though that Tyler comes back, but Rem should, absolutely should. New Jersey. I don't have anything starting with an S anytime soon. No idea why I started with that. But yeah, the player's name starts with an S. And I'm going with Sharon Govich with the New Jersey Devils. The hard work pays off. He's always had that really strong work ethic. And I was expecting the offense from him we saw this year. I was expecting it last year. And he is one of those players that when you watch him play, and then you look at his point totals, you're kind of surprised they're not higher. This year, the totals are finally up. A 20-goal scorer, and he should be able to stay there. New Jersey's got a good attack. Their offense is good. It's easy to brush them off because they've been outside the playoffs for a while now. But they had a good attack, and there's a couple of areas they got to, shore up. But Sharon Govich is part of the solution, not part of the problem. For the New York Islanders, I went with Dobson. So I've been talking about free agents. I have not mentioned Dobson yet. Dobson's a restricted free agent, I do believe, in this offseason, and he's going to get a raise. He's going to get a healthy raise. Dobson, as well, is an example of why when people complain that rookies and kids aren't playing enough, that I think there's a lack of foresight there sometimes from fans. We're just so excited to see them play, right? Dobson was a healthy scratch regularly under Barry Trotz, and this year he absolutely shone as one of their best defensemen, absolutely their best defenseman offensively at this stage. And so that's why you bring them along slowly. Some players handle it really, really well. Yeah, some players don't, but I think bringing them along slowly is the best way to do it with the kids. Unless you're talking about like a superstar, megastar, Crosby, Ovechkin level player. But in general, I think bringing them along slowly, start them on the fourth line, get them used to the game, makes a lot of sense. And in the case with defensemen, sometimes, yeah, they're going to be that number 7. They're going to be a healthy scratch here and there, and it's just part of the game. Detroit. I went back and forth on who to talk about for Detroit. I decided that I would talk about the fact that Sam Gagner, nice bounce back season from Gagner. Honestly, he was one of their better, I would say, bottom 6 forwards. I think he did have some top 6 here and there when there was injuries and everything else going on. But I thought Gagner had a good year. And I think that there's every reason to believe that could work again next year, Gagner in Detroit. So nice to see. And of course, he spent some time in the minors with that contract the Canucks signed that did not work out. Got traded around. He was actually loaned to the Marlies for a while to be closer to his family and all that. But now, NHL player, gets a full season in Detroit. I'm happy for him. So yeah, Gagner, good year for him. Vegas. There's only one player I could put up here for Vegas. Really, honestly. Dodonov. So, Evgeny Dodonov, showing what a great guy he is. He gets traded to a team that's on his no-trade list. So, he ends up back in Vegas, right? That could have been awkward. It would have been totally understandable if Dodonov wasn't playing great after that. He played better after Vegas got him back. It felt like they made a trade with the Ducks to get him because he was out of the lineup, he comes back, and it got their attack going. So while the way that the season finished was a disappointment and a letdown for Vegas fans and for Vegas management, none of that goes on to Dodonov. And I'd go this far. This offseason, they really don't have to move his money. There's other money they can move. There's players with expiring contracts. I think Dodonov should stick around in Vegas. He clearly fits well there. He scores key goals at big times, and that's important. You get those important goals. Keep the guy around. All right, Winnipeg. Winnipeg, I went back and forth too because I do talk about a number of Winnipeg players a lot. So instead of Connor, instead of Ehlers, instead of Scheifele, I'm going with Perfetti. I thought Perfetti was good in the games he got into. He only played 18. Did get injured, so as long as he's healthy in training camp and he can play a full season in their lineup, I think Perfetti's one of those guys who quietly could help the Jets out tremendously down the road. Obviously, a first-round draft pick. There's a lot expected of him. But for the Jets, disappointing season, missing the playoffs. Having Perfetti there means that they could potentially move forward if they feel like Perfetti can play a top 6 role. We'll see. We'll see if he's on the third line or if he ends up in a more prominent role. The Jets really, I don't know what they're going to do this offseason. They should be kind of fun to watch next year, though, because I think they were one of the biggest underachievers this year. The Jets, again, I keep saying this on paper, very good team. For the Ducks, you know what I went with for the Ducks? I went with the player who just retired. Getzlaf had a very good start to the season. Very good first half of the season. It tailed off in the second half, but so did the Ducks. And it was fun to watch him play out his final season and not make a big deal out of the retirement. The retirement comes out not that long before he retires. He didn't want to do the big farewell tour and all that. I have nothing but respect for Getzlaf at this point, which is weird because at the time that this channel started, Getzlaf was one of those guys I just didn't like in Anaheim. And yeah, every time I watched an Anaheim broadcast, it had, he rescued some three-legged dog out of a river, or he was in some Arctic expedition and he saved a bunch of seals. I'm obviously, it's hyperbole, but it just felt like Getzlaf was a great guy and he did all kinds of awesome stuff. So it made it so much, which I hated that, but it just made it so that I could not like the guy. And it was too bad because for years as a Canuck fan, I was like, I can't stand Getzlaf. And then it's, he just saved that forest ranger and he just put that forest fire out by himself. I don't know how he did it, but man, he's awesome. Anyways, so now we're going to get action movies starring Ryan Getzlaf, right? That's got to happen. All right, Ottawa. This is where goalie shows up. So it was a disappointing season for the Ottawa Senators. Without Anton Forsberg, it would have been much more disappointing. If they didn't have an option other than to keep Ryan Murray or whoever else, season would have been a lot worse. Forsberg was fantastic. So he's earned every penny of that contract that he's got signed now. And it's great to see. This is a goaltender who bounced around the league. Waivers, wearing pads for a team that he'd been waived by 2 waivers ago. And so that's done now. He's now got roots set up in Ottawa. I really hope I'm not jinxing it. I probably am. He'll probably get traded now, and I apologize if that happens. But it looks like he's got roots right now in Ottawa, so that's great for him. Philadelphia. For Philadelphia, I went with a goaltender as well. Martin Jones. Now, Jones is UFA this summer, so Jones not likely to stick around with Philly. But I thought he had the best year for the Flyers this year that he's had in a while. I like Martin Jones. I think he's a good goaltender. That being said, he had a couple of really challenging years in San Jose, and I had some concern and doubt about whether or not he was going to be able to stay in the National Hockey League if he didn't get that straightened out. And in Philly, he did. Philly, it was a nightmare season. They had two losing streaks of 10 or more games in the same season. And so Jones had to be behind all that. And while he wasn't fantastic and he didn't get Vezina votes, I still thought it was a nice bounce-back season for him. So hopefully he lands on his feet next season as well. Columbus, I went with somebody that got in the Seth Jones trade, Adam Boquist. Boquist was fantastic. I thought he was really good at stretches during the season. He's still young, so there's still some learning to be done here for him. But yeah, Boquist I thought was a lot of fun to watch. And I still think that Seth Jones trade, I think Columbus won that deal. They don't have that cap hit that Jones is now bestowing upon the Chicago Blackhawks. And yeah, Boquist I thought was really good. So even if that was a 1-for-1 deal, because of the amount of cap savings you're getting with Boquist, I don't know that it's necessarily a win for Chicago. You can't just look at trades anymore and say, well, this is the better player, so that team won. You also have to consider the cap hits. Say this player costs you $9 million, that guy costs you $2 million, so that's $7 million less dollars, and you're able to go out and get this many other players as well. So it's not as easy now to grade trades as it used to be. And so, yeah, I think Columbus did well in that trade. For Vancouver, I had to double check and make sure that I did write down Luke Schenn, because there were others I could have written down. Luke Schenn had an excellent year. I talked about him in the video where I talked about JT Miller. And I've talked about Schenn a lot this year. And not only that, but if you go back in my videos far enough, when the Canucks lost Schenn on free agency and he ends up going to Tampa, and he got a cup ring. I mean, you know, I'm not going to say anything about a guy who got cup rings. That's great. But I was upset the Canucks let Luke Schenn go, because Schenn had chemistry with Quinn Hughes right away, and then they just let him go. And it wasn't like he got like an $8 million a year contract from Tampa. It was a reasonable, good contract. Just now he's back in Vancouver, and I hope he sticks around. That's why the trade deadline, when there was, well, maybe they could move Schenn. No more of that. Stop it. Just stop it, internet. Knock it. It's like the whole, well, the Canucks need to do a rebuild. Okay, no. They've made the playoffs once since 2015. That's 7 years ago. No. Okay. That I'm not young enough for a rebuild. I'll just have to abandon Vancouver and go off and cheer, because I just don't. Anyways, moving on to teams in the playoffs. So you know what? I'll go ahead and change colors. I'll change colors because it's fun to change colors. And so we'll do that. For Nashville, Carrier. So it raised a few eyebrows when Alexander Carrier was when Alexander Carrier was protected from the expansion draft by the Nashville Predators. That's what I was trying to say. But he rewarded them for their protection with what was an excellent season for Carrier. So Nashville, some players having really good years, some not as great, but yeah, Carrier's been really good. And I think that's one guy to talk about, because Nashville always produces defensemen. Always. They're always producing more. I swear, you could have like their top 4 all get hurt and magically 4 guys would show up and they'd all be excellent. Nashville's defense has been basically their calling card right from their first year in the National Hockey League. Minnesota, I went with Ryan Hartman. Now, if anybody's wondering why I put the R up there, it's because every now and then I'll say Phil Hartman. I get the Hartman wrong, and Phil Hartman, one of the funniest men I've ever seen in my life, may he rest in peace, was not a National Hockey League player. So Ryan Hartman had a really good year for the Minnesota Wild. I don't know if he can replicate that. His name may end up on the board again when I talk about players who probably had a career year and it may come down next season. But yeah, he was very good around the net, and hopefully that continues for him. Obviously a steal for the Minnesota Wild at this point. And so, yeah, we'll see if he can keep that up next year. Dallas, I went back and forth on this one. One thing with Dallas, though, is that there weren't a lot of guys who were scoring a ton of goals and playing really, really well all year. Joe Pavelski. It's all about Joe Pavelski. He had a tough start to the season. He was quiet to start the year. It's easy to forget that, but he was. And I remember, I think it was Steve Dangle said something about him looking old, and having him in his fantasy. And I said, yeah, I don't know what happened. He just seemed to have gotten old overnight. It was an exchange along those lines on Twitter. And it was like he saw that conversation. It was like, oh, old am I? And he just went on a tear. So if you guys want me to talk about a player looking kind of old so that they get better next year, just go ahead and tag me on Twitter when they go into a slump. Because apparently I can bump the slump by saying that. Because Pavelski arguably had the best year of his career this year. All right, from Toronto, I went with a player that there's a lot of rumors right now about him being on his way out of town. And he might be. But Elia Mckayev, just fantastic run this year. After last year, which was clearly a challenge for him, and he had his frustrations at points. Hey, if you watched that Amazon miniseries, you saw it. He was frustrated at points. But this year, he showed what he can do. And I thought Mckayev was sometimes their most reliable goal scorer at certain points. Austin Matthews, best goal scorer in the NHL right now? Yes. but Mckayev at points this year was a deciding factor for them. So if they trade him, if that ends up happening because of cap reasons, I do wonder if they're going to be able to get enough back to make it so they don't regret that deal. All right, Kings. For the Kings, see, I write a Q and I start saying Quings. But Jonathan Quick had quite the bounce back year, and it's good because Peterson had some challenges this year. His numbers weren't quite where I think the Kings or he would have wanted them to be. So the fact that Quick had a very good year, that's good news for Kings fans. And yet it's troubling news as well because you need to have that guy who can replace Jonathan Quick. That's supposed to be Cal Peterson. We'll see if he can get that back this season. Washington. For Washington, so I've done list videos on like of this nature before, and Caps fans always mention Faravari, so I'm going to talk about Faravari. A very good year. I don't know how much offense he'll give you from the blue line, but I believe it was 8 goals that he had with 17 points overall. That probably comes up a bit next year. I don't know if he gets the 8 goals, but he probably gets at least 20 points. And he's a very good defenseman. Just very sound. And sometimes all it takes is having a defenseman that doesn't make those mistakes that make you yell at the TV. That's sometimes what it is. And I know as a hockey fan, there are certain players that I've yelled at the TV a lot about. I've talked about that on this channel before. But yeah, Faravari for the Caps, not that guy. If you hear her playing in the background, that's actually Bear. Since we got the kittens, she's decided she's going to play more with more toys, and she's more of a kitten than they are. So it's not jealousy, though. Never. No. So yeah, Faravari for the Caps. Very good overall season for him this year, and I think there's better days ahead. Again, I don't know if he gets those 8 goals again, but if he does, and if he gets more assists, bonus, right? Boston, I'm going to come back to Jake Debrusk. Now, with the firing of Bruce Cassidy, does that mean Jake Debrusk rescinds his trade request? Because there was a lot of discussion about whether or not, Debrusk just had this broken relationship with Cassidy, how bad it was. And so if that's what the main issue is for Debrusk with being in Boston, does the firing of Cassidy mean Debrusk wants to stay? And so we'll see whether or not that's the case. It may be. And Debrusk played very well this year. I don't know. Again, I don't know if he gets back to 30 goals next year, if he has like a full season and he feels confident and he's happy and all that. But he should at least be a 25 goal scorer, I would think, for Boston. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to watch for the Bruins. Pittsburgh. Rust. I've been impressed with Brian Rust for a long time, and it just feels like he has evolved into a point-per-game player very, very quietly. And it's not talked about nearly as much this year as last year, where it really surprised people, his scoring. But he's a really hard worker. And very often players that are hard workers, eventually those goals will come. Those points will come because coaches know who the hard workers are. And so they'll start putting them out on the ice more because they know they're hard workers, and maybe they don't make those defensive errors, and then that gives them the chance to work on the offense. And who knows, maybe play with Sidney Crosby, which might help, right? So yeah, Rust for the Penguins is my choice there. On the St. Louis side of things, player who may be done with St. Louis, could be, might be, possibly. Just looking to see where Bear is. Anyways, Perron. Perron may very well be on his way out of St. Louis. He's an unrestricted free agent this summer. It would be odd to see him in a different jersey in the fall, but he has earned a really good contract. Now, he's older, so that may cause teams to offer him a little bit less than he wants for term. But Perron, just what a huge goal scorer. And in the playoffs, he was fantastic for them. If you needed a big goal, you threw Perron on the ice. If you needed to shut somebody down, you had O'Reilly on the ice. But yeah, Perron was the guy if you needed a goal. Some controversy there, of course, with Perron as the series went on with Colorado. Perron's a fiery player as well. So I'd be interested to see if Vegas might come in and make an offer on Perron and try to bring him back. They had him in the first year. So it might be one of those players that maybe Vegas circles back on. But yeah, I don't know how they'd find the money. That's a whole other conversation. But I think Perron will be in demand if he does hit the market. Calgary. Oh, I'm lazy with Calgary. No, Shannon, don't write it down. Because everybody's going to expect you to write Mangiapane. You love Mangiapane. Everybody knows you love Mangiapane. And a bunch of goals, and that was great. So, I can't not talk about Mangiapane. 35 goals is fantastic. And again, the work ethic and the scoring is there. But I will talk about Rasmus Anderson as well. Anderson stepped in. Giordano was out, and they needed somebody to step in and score the points and do all the wonderful stuff you need done on that blue line. And I thought Anderson was fantastic. If he gets a couple more goals next year than he got this year, great. But honestly, the points are there, the assists are there. And again, the effort's there, the smarts, the intelligence, the way he plays the game. Really impressed with Rasmus Anderson. In general, with Calgary's blue line anyways. But I think Anderson's one of those under-the-radar players in the National Hockey League. And Anderson would be overshadowed even by just other guys on that blue line, right? Florida. So Florida's going to have a cap crunch, and at some point, they're going to have to figure out how much Mason Marchment's worth. Mason Marchment looked fantastic at points this year, like dynamic forward kind of fantastic, where people might be asking, what was Toronto thinking trading Mason Marchment? And I still don't have an answer to that, other than I will say this, and I've said this before with other players. There's no guarantee that if Marchment had stayed in Toronto, that he would have had a season like he did this year in Florida, because it's a different setup, a different team, and sometimes you just need that right mix, that chemistry, right? And so Marchment, the chemistry absolutely worked in Florida for him this year. Carolina, going with a rookie for Carolina. So we're gonna crown the Calder. Seth Jarvis won't get the Calder, but Seth Jarvis got something that I think is more important than the Calder. He got a lot of playoff experience. And he got a lot of playoff experience playing with a pretty darn good team, and he'll take that into next year, and I think his scoring is going to go up. I don't know what the ceiling is for Seth Jarvis, but his scoring should go up. He's a bona fide top six player, I would think, once he's got everything all figured out, and once Carolina moves guys in and moves guys out and all that, because every team does that from year in and year out. Jarvis should, year by year, keep moving up in their lineup. And so, yeah, I think the sky's not necessarily the limit, but it's pretty high. I do think it's pretty high for Jarvis, and he's a hard worker as well. So just the fact he's a hard worker means he'll keep his job in the National Hockey League. The scoring helps as well. And I think sometimes with young players, that's what it is too. The scoring is there, but a coach might get mad for a perceived lack of effort, or there's something there they're not happy with. On the Rangers front, I went with... So this is based on the playoff run. I think we've seen the evolution of Lafreniere. And while people want to talk about Lafreniere and Kakko and, these guys aren't very, they're busts and da-da-da. Lafreniere had 19 goals this year in the regular season. And even though he only had 2 goals in the postseason, I was more impressed with him in the playoffs. I think he's really started to show that desire and that drive. And I think he's really started to play like... I don't know how else to put it. It just felt like he was showing a little more emotion, a little more leadership maybe as well. And so yeah, Lafreniere, very good run for him in the playoffs. So yeah, looking forward to what Lafreniere does next year. Don't be too surprised when I get into the players that I think are going to have a big year next year and take that next step offensively. Don't be surprised when Lafreniere's name is on that board. All right, Oilers. Another young player here, Bouchard. So again, for people who just skipped to the end of this video, they're not going to have any idea. Bouchard, I thought, really played well for Edmonton. A blue line that's never quite gotten over losing Oscar Klefbom, and the word is not good with Klefbom. The word has it he won't be playing next year. His career essentially appears to be done, which is a shame. And there's always that, is this guy going to play next year? There's just players that end up on the LTIR and they never come off of it. And so Bouchard, I thought, did a good job of stepping in and providing a lot of offense. And not being too shabby defensively either. I think with Bouchard, he's got a very solid future for the Edmonton Oilers. Kind of excited to see what he does. So while we're all still talking about the Oilers and everything falling apart here or there, Bouchard, not really a part of a problem, I didn't think anyways. So now we get into the finalists on the Colorado side. So last year, Francouz injured. It's been nice to see Francouz come back and play well. Now, his numbers weren't fantastic thus far in the playoffs as they head into the finals to start tomorrow, but he's 6-0. And a .906 save percentage it's better than the .897 that Kemper had. And I think Francouz has played well. I'm really glad to see him back and playing. And so I do wish him the best. I think that he played better than the .906 might tell you, and I think that he can play better than he has thus far. And so, yeah, I wanted to just mention Francouz in this video, and there we are. I thought he had a good regular season, too, and I'm glad that he's extended through. I think they've got a 2-year extension they signed him to not too long ago. I know I did a video on it, but I do the video and then right out of the brain. And then on Tampa, I've mentioned him before. I'll mention him again here. Cory Perry, and it's continued through the playoffs. Cory Perry, I know there's people who can't stand the way he plays hockey, but he draws penalties, he draws attention, he knocks guys off their game, and he can still put the puck in the net regularly enough that you have to respect his shot, and it opens up the ice for him to get a good pass through as well. So Cory Perry is still a money player, and he is still capable of winning, and now he's in a Stanley Cup final for the third time in 3 years with a third different team, this time with Tampa instead of against Tampa, trying to get that first cup ring since 2007. Can he get it? We'll find out over the next approximately 10 to 14 days. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always, or I guess if it goes 14 days from now. Yeah, there you go. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.